ladies and gentlemen. We live in a world where everyone wants to be seen. Everyone's talking, tweeting, snapping, posting. But let me tell you something powerful. Growth doesn't happen in the spotlight, it happens in the shadows. Focus on yourself, not because you're selfish, but because you're responsible. See, before you can transform your finances, your relationships, or your business, you have to transform your thinking. And that doesn't happen by watching everybody else. You cannot lead others or attract success without mastering your own habits, emotions, and mindset. That's not just a quote. It's a law. It's a principle rooted in truth, tested by time, and proven by experience. See, the biggest lie most people believe is that success begins outside of them. They think if they just get the right business partner, the right audience, the right opportunity, or the right recognition, they'll finally elevate. But elevation doesn't start out there. It starts in here, in your inner life, in the part of you that no one else sees. You can't lead externally what you haven't conquered internally. You can't produce consistent fruit from a life that lacks consistent discipline. And you can't expect your circumstances to grow if your character remains the same. Mastering yourself isn't glamorous. It's quiet work. It's not celebrated. There are no trophies for saying no to temptation. No applause for setting your alarm at 4 a.m. and actually getting up when it goes off. No standing ovation for praying instead of panicking, fasting instead of feasting, reading instead of scrolling. But that's exactly where mastery is built, when no one is watching and you choose alignment over attention. The truth is, most people spend more time decorating their image than developing their identity. You want to look disciplined, not be disciplined. But image management is exhausting. You can't Photoshop your spirit. You can't filter your focus. You can't hashtag your way into healing. Mastery requires more than pretending. It requires pruning. That means cutting off distractions. That means confronting your own excuses. That means choosing structure even when your emotions scream for chaos. And here's the paradox. When you truly focus on mastering yourself, you no longer need the world to validate your worth. You move differently. You're no longer triggered by people's opinions. You're no longer chasing approval or performing for applause. You've trained your mind to focus, your spirit to discern, and your body to obey. That kind of discipline attracts success like a magnet. Why? Because success recognizes preparation. Favor finds focus, and provision is drawn to those who are positioned properly. Now let's get practical. Mastering your habits means deciding who you want to become and aligning your daily actions with that identity. Not once, not when you feel inspired, but every day. Because habits don't lie. You don't rise to the level of your intentions, you fall to the level of your routines. If your routines are sloppy, your results will be average. If your mindset is reactive, your outcomes will be unstable. But if you command your day, master your mornings, and create non-negotiables in your schedule, you begin to operate from power, not pressure. Mastering your emotions is just as critical. Let's be real. Life will test you, people will provoke you, delays will frustrate you, but emotional maturity is the ability to choose response over reaction. It's when you can feel anger and still respond in wisdom. It's when you can feel fear and still act in faith. It's when you're no longer a slave to your triggers because you've trained your soul to follow truth. And when you master your emotions, you stop making permanent decisions based on temporary feelings. You stop quitting when it's hard. You stop sabotaging what you prayed for. Because now you're governed by principle, not by pressure. Mindset mastery, finally, is about reprogramming your internal dialogue. You cannot outperform your own belief system. If you see yourself as a victim, you'll never lead with victory. If you believe the world owes you something, you'll resent people who succeed. But when you take responsibility for your life, your choices, and your growth, something shifts. You stop waiting for permission. You stop shrinking in doubt. You stop replaying failure. Instead, you feed your faith with new language, new thoughts, new patterns, until your inner world becomes stronger than your outer circumstances. Staying silent isn't about weakness, it's about wisdom. In a culture that constantly rewards noise, Those who know how to withhold their words hold a different kind of power. There's a misconception that being quiet means you're unsure, passive, or disconnected, but in truth, silence is often the sign of strength, focus, and strategic clarity. It's not that you don't have something to say. It's that you know the value of saying it at the right time, in the right way, and to the right audience. When you operate with that kind of discernment, you don't waste energy explaining yourself to people who aren't ready to understand. Silence creates space for growth. It allows you to incubate ideas before exposing them. Most people speak out of compulsion. They talk to fill the air, to get attention, to gain validation. But when you're focused on building something meaningful, you realize that most progress happens away from public view. Just like a seed grows best when it's buried in soil and protected from the elements, your goals need time, privacy, and protection in order to take root and flourish. Every word you speak is a seed, and if you're not careful, you'll speak prematurely and sabotage what you were still in the process of nurturing. The power of silence is that it keeps you in control of your energy. Words cost energy. Conversations cost attention. Defending your vision costs time. And every time you speak, you're making a withdrawal from your focus account. So the question becomes, are your words investments or expenses? Are you speaking because it's wise or because it's habitual? Strategic silence isn't about being unavailable. It's about being intentional. When you learn to quiet the noise around you, you also quiet the chaos within you. You begin to hear yourself more clearly. You begin to hear God more clearly. And that clarity empowers you to act with precision, not reaction. Another benefit of staying silent is that it reveals what and who really matters. When you stop explaining yourself, you discover who genuinely supports you. When you stop announcing every move, you find out which relationships are built on presence, not performance. Silence filters your circle. Not everyone deserves access to your process. Not everyone can handle the weight of your vision. When you withhold your words, you create space to observe. You start to see who listens even when you're not speaking. You recognize who respects your journey without constant updates. Silence also protects your momentum. Have you ever noticed how quickly excitement turns to anxiety once too many people know your plans? That's because speaking too soon invites interference. Every declaration invites opinions. Every revelation invites projections. And too much feedback, especially from people who haven't built anything themselves, can destabilize your focus. You don't need more advice, you need more action. And action requires an atmosphere of peace, not pressure. When you stay silent, you're not hiding, you're shielding. You're creating the kind of mental and spiritual space where ideas can grow without being choked by commentary. In strategic silence, you also develop emotional discipline. You stop needing to react to every opinion. You stop engaging every critic. You stop trying to prove yourself to people who already made up their minds. You start to see that silence is not about submission. It's about selection. You're selecting your battles, your conversations, your responses. You're no longer triggered by every misunderstanding because you understand that truth defends itself over time. You begin to move with the confidence of someone who knows that every moment you spend arguing with people on the sidelines is a moment you're not running toward your goal on the field. There's a quiet power in watching, listening, learning, and moving silently in alignment with your purpose. You develop a heightened awareness of timing because timing is everything. A wise person doesn't just know what to say, they know when to say it. And often, the most powerful response is no response at all. In that silence, you sharpen your focus, protect your process, and build the discipline that leads to results louder than any announcement ever could. What you focus on expands. That's not motivational fluff. It's a fundamental principle of how your mind, your spirit, and your life operate. Whatever you give consistent energy to, whether positive or negative, begins to multiply. If you focus on distractions, you'll find more of them. If you focus on problems, they'll seem bigger. But if you train your focus on growth, solutions, purpose, and mastery, those things begin to dominate your environment. Focus isn't just about blocking out noise, it's about choosing what you magnify. And most people aren't failing because they're incapable. They're failing because their attention is scattered, and scattered attention leads to scattered outcomes. Focus is like a magnifying glass. On its own, sunlight doesn't burn. But when you filter that sunlight through a lens and concentrate it into one narrow point, it becomes fire. That's what happens when you filter your life through intentional focus. You go from being busy to being effective. You go from spinning your wheels to actually gaining traction. You stop chasing 10 things at once and start mastering the one thing that moves everything forward. The problem is that most people are addicted to distraction. They don't realize that every notification, every comparison, every side conversation is pulling them away from their power source. You can't build anything lasting when your energy is diluted. People underestimate the cost of divided focus. Multitasking is praised in modern culture, but what it really does is weaken your ability to go deep. When you're halfway in 5 different areas, you end up becoming excellent in none. And excellence doesn't come from dabbling. It comes from immersion. It comes from giving your best energy to a single assignment until it's completed, until it's fruitful, until it becomes a foundation for the next level. Focus means turning down the volume on everything else so you can tune in to what matters most. It's not always comfortable. It may look like isolation. It may feel like boredom. But in that stillness, something powerful is forming. When you focus, you start to notice things you missed before. You begin to see patterns. You recognize what's working and what isn't. You gain clarity, not just about your goals, but about yourself. Focus reveals your priorities. It shows you whether your calendar matches your values. It exposes whether your daily habits are aligned with your long-term vision. And when there's a gap between what you say you want and what you actually focus on, that's where frustration lives. That's where discontent grows. The breakthrough doesn't come from adding more to your life. It comes from subtracting what doesn't belong. Focus also sharpens your decision-making. When you're clear on your direction, you say no more easily. You stop negotiating with distractions. You stop entertaining drama. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't share your vision. You move with conviction, not confusion. You realize that not everything deserves your energy. Some opportunities are actually detours. Some relationships are actually assignments sent to delay you. And when you focus, you don't just see what's in front of you, you discern what's behind it. That level of vision is only available to those who are still enough to see and disciplined enough to keep looking. There's another level of focus that's internal. It's the decision to monitor your thoughts and take control of your inner dialogue. Because if your mind is focused on fear, on failure, on what could go wrong, that becomes the story you live by. But if you fix your focus on faith, on discipline, on purpose, you start to write a different narrative. Your outer world always follows your inner focus. You can't keep thinking like a victim. You can't keep fixating on lack and expect abundance to show up. Focus trains your attention to look for what's possible, not just what's present. This kind of focus takes effort. It takes consistency. It takes saying no to things that used to excite you because they don't serve you anymore. It takes managing your time like it's your most valuable resource because it is. It takes waking up every day and deciding that your calling is more important than your comfort, that your future is worth the sacrifice, and that your vision demands the discipline of unshakable focus. People talk to be seen. They talk to be noticed, to be affirmed, to be validated. But what they fail to understand is that talk is cheap. Execution is expensive. Talking doesn't require discipline. It doesn't require commitment. It doesn't require follow-through. Anyone can say what they're going to do. Anyone can outline a big dream, sketch out a goal, or speak with passion about what they plan to achieve. But the difference between dreamers and doers is simple. Dreamers talk about it. Doers work on it. Execution isn't glamorous. It's not loud. It's not always inspiring. It's often tedious, repetitive, and uncelebrated, but it's the only path to real transformation and long-term success. We live in an age where everyone has a platform. Everyone can post, share, declare, and project an image of productivity. But the truth is, many people are more committed to looking busy than they are to being productive. The gap between declaration and demonstration is filled with habits, discipline, and quiet consistency. You can't build anything meaningful by simply talking about it. Words are powerful, but only when they're followed by aligned action. The problem is, people are seduced by the emotional high of telling their goals. It gives them a sense of progress without having actually made any. But execution doesn't give you a dopamine rush. Execution gives you results, and results come after repeated effort, often in silence. Execution costs you your comfort. It costs you your excuses. It costs you the right to stay average, and that's why most people avoid it. It's much easier to post a vision board than to live out the grind that comes with manifesting what's on it. It's much easier to tell your friends you're starting a business than to stay up late studying systems, building funnels, or managing client expectations. It's much easier to say you're going to write a book than to sit down every morning and wrestle with words until they form something worth reading. Execution exposes whether you actually want the outcome or just enjoy the attention that comes with announcing it. Execution builds credibility. Talking builds an audience. But credibility doesn't come from charisma, it comes from consistency. When people see that you follow through, that you finish what you start, that you meet your word with action, they begin to trust you. And more importantly, you begin to trust yourself. That self-trust is critical. It fuels momentum. It reinforces your identity as someone who delivers. When you execute consistently, your confidence doesn't come from hype, it comes from history. You remember what you've already overcome, what you've already built, what you've already endured. That kind of inner confidence can't be borrowed or faked. It's earned in the trenches of disciplined execution. There's a cost to talking too much and doing too little. Eventually, people stop listening. Eventually, even you stop believing yourself. Repeated declarations with no delivery create internal dissonance. You start to feel frustrated, not because you're incapable, but because your actions aren't matching your words. That frustration can turn into shame. That shame can lead to procrastination. And suddenly, the vision that once inspired you becomes the very thing that haunts you. The solution isn't to talk louder, it's to get quieter and start executing. The people who are truly moving forward are often the quietest in the room. They don't need to convince anyone of what they're building because they know that in time, the results will speak for themselves. They're not consumed with broadcasting every step. They're too busy taking steps. They're not trying to prove anything. They're trying to finish something. They've understood that while everyone else is explaining, they're evolving. While others are performing, they're producing. While others are shouting, they're sharpening. Execution is the great separator. It distinguishes the interested from the invested, the casual from the committed, the visible from the valuable. Your value in this world is not determined by how well you speak about your potential, but by how consistently you produce results that align with your calling. Constantly explaining your plans invites resistance, criticism, and unnecessary influence. The more you speak on what you're building before it's built, the more you open the door for people to place their opinions, doubts, and insecurities into your process. Validation is a subtle trap. It feels good in the moment, but it weakens your internal foundation. Every time you look for applause before completion, you condition yourself to need external confirmation to stay committed. That's dangerous. Because when the applause stops or the approval turns into skepticism, you begin to second guess yourself. The vision becomes cloudy, not because it changed, but because you allowed too many voices in a space meant for stillness and clarity. When you constantly seek validation, you give other people too much authority over your direction. You begin to move based on reactions instead of revelation. Instead of trusting your instincts, your prayer, your discernment, You wait to see how people feel about what you're doing. But people will always have something to say. Some will cheer for you, some will doubt you, and others will project their limitations onto you. That's why sharing too soon can slow you down. It exposes your dream to people who haven't earned the right to speak into it. It invites feedback from people who aren't qualified to evaluate what you're called to build. Their opinions are often rooted in fear, jealousy, or a limited perspective of what's possible. There's a sacredness to silence, especially in the early stages of building. What you're working on in private is still forming. It's not ready for public consumption. It's not fully matured. When a seed is planted in the ground, it doesn't need commentary. It needs the right conditions. It needs protection from the elements, time to take root, and consistent care. If you dig it up every few days to show people it's growing, you risk killing it. The same principle applies to your dreams. Constantly exposing them makes them vulnerable to criticism that can crush your confidence before your faith has had time to solidify. Validation seeking also leads to performance-based living. You start doing things not because they are in alignment with your purpose, but because they're likely to impress or satisfy other people's expectation. Over time, this erodes your authenticity. You lose touch with your own voice. You begin to shape your life around how it looks instead of how it feels. You become a performer, always seeking a stage, always trying to prove something, never fully resting in your own knowing. But purpose doesn't come from performance. It comes from alignment. And alignment requires solitude, not a spotlight. It requires internal integrity, not external praise. There's a discipline in learning to move without announcing, to make decisions without broadcasting, to commit to growth without documenting every step. This doesn't mean you become isolated. It means you become intentional. You choose to let your life speak for itself. You trust that when it's time, the right people will see it, the right doors will open, and the right opportunities will align. But until then, you work in silence, not because you're hiding, but because you're maturing, because you've outgrown the need for attention and upgraded to the need for alignment. People often confuse silence with secrecy. It's not about being secretive, it's about being selective. You're not withholding because you're afraid, you're withholding because you're focused. You've learned that not every move needs a witness, not every breakthrough needs a banner. Some of the most powerful changes happen in private. Some of the most important transformations are invisible to the outside world. But you feel them, you know them, and because you know them, you no longer need others to confirm them. That's when you become unshakable. That's when your energy stops fluctuating based on approval. That's when you stop looking around for validation and start looking within for confirmation. When you choose to focus on yourself, you reclaim your power, the power that gets lost every time you compare your progress to someone else's timeline, the power that drains away when you make your decisions based on trends, pressure, or public opinion. Focusing on yourself doesn't mean being selfish. It means being responsible. It means taking ownership of your growth, your healing, your habits, and your vision. It means stopping the blame game, refusing to play victim, and deciding that you will become the kind of person who attracts results through discipline, not noise. You stop pointing fingers and start facing mirrors. You realize that your external circumstances are often a reflection of your internal condition. If your life feels out of control, check your thoughts. If your results are inconsistent, examine your habits. If your relationships are unhealthy, evaluate your standards. That kind of personal accountability is uncomfortable, but it's where real transformation begins. You stop blaming the economy, the algorithm, or your upbringing. You start asking better questions. What can I change? What do I need to learn? What am I avoiding that's costing me progress? Focusing on yourself requires discipline. It requires the willingness to do the work when no one is watching, to stay committed when no one is clapping, and to hold yourself to a higher standard, even when shortcuts look tempting. You stop needing external motivation because you've cultivated internal conviction. You don't wait for permission to grow. You don't wait for validation to evolve. You move because you're called, not because you're applauded. That's the kind of mindset that produces results that don't fade when attention fades. You're no longer moved by trends because you're anchored in purpose. The more you focus on yourself, the less reactive you become. You stop being triggered by other people's opinions. You stop being distracted by other people's timelines. You stop being shaken by other people's success. You're not in competition because you understand that your path is uniquely tailored to your purpose. You celebrate others without questioning your own worth. You admire without imitating. You learn without losing yourself. That level of emotional maturity brings peace. It frees up mental bandwidth. It clears space for creativity and clarity, and in that space, growth accelerates. When your focus turns inward, you also begin to develop a deeper sense of identity. You're no longer shaped by circumstances. You're grounded in character. You don't just react to life, you respond with intention. You know what you believe, what you value, what you're building, and why it matters. That clarity influences how you show up in every room, every relationship, every opportunity. You stop chasing success and start aligning with it. You stop forcing outcomes and start flowing with wisdom. You start recognizing that self-focus isn't about isolation, it's about elevation. It's about becoming so rooted in your vision that distractions no longer derail you. The world teaches you to focus outward, to keep score, to compete, to prove. But lasting success is always built from the inside out. It starts with who you are when no one's looking, how you think, what you prioritize, what you're willing to sacrifice. That's where the real work is. That's where the foundation gets built. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to explain it. You just have to commit to it. Day by day, quietly, even when it's not glamorous, even when it's not appreciated, even when it's misunderstood. Because in time, the results will reveal the reality. The fruit will confirm the root. And the person you become through the process will speak louder than anything you ever could have said. When you truly focus on yourself and stay silent, you shift from performing to producing, from chasing attention to building intention. Silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the space where clarity forms, where discipline is cultivated, and where transformation takes root. You stop seeking applause and start creating alignment. You stop needing permission and start walking in purpose. The loudest moves are often made in quiet rooms, and the most powerful growth happens when no one is watching. Let your results be your response. Let your character be your credibility.